activity online. Yep. All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It being 6 p.m, I'll declare open the rescheduled July Ordinary Council meeting of the Shire of Capel. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on, the Wadandi people. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to all members of the Aboriginal communities and their culture, and to elders past and present, their descendants who are with us today and those who will follow in their footsteps. We have 5 councillors in attendance tonight, with 2 councillors joining us via electronic means. Under Regulation 14C2B of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, as per the amended Regulations 2022, I have authorised Councillor Cara Andrew and Councillor Christine Tarantroy to attend this ordinary meeting of the Council via Teams. As per Regulation 14C5, I have taken into consideration the advice provided by Councillors Andrew and Tarantroy that they will attend the meeting from a location where confidentiality can be maintained, and I consider it acceptable. A member who attends a meeting under the authorisation of Regulation 14C2 by electronic means is determined under Sub-Regulation 2 to be taken to attend and be present at the meeting for the purposes of the Act and these regulations, while the member is in contact by those electronic means in which each other member and is in contact with each other member present at the meeting. We also have an apology from Councillor Kieran Noonan. There's no response to previous public questions taken on notice, so we'll now move to public question time. I've got some questions on notice. The first from Judy Hearn of Peppermint Grove Beach. Sorry, Ms. Hearn, your microphone's not on, we'll just get it on.
Talk?
That's the one.
Don't usually have to press a button to talk. My questions are in regard to provision for the coastal hazard risk management and adaptation planning, otherwise known as the CHIRMAP. Over several years, electors have asked questions at annual electors meetings and possibly OCMs about what forward planning and financial provision has been made by Council to prepare for imminent responsibilities in the matter of coastal adaptation and risk management. So I'm pleased to note in the corporate business plan review that's presented for Council's acceptance tonight, among the key on-track actions listed to be completed in 2023-24 is CHIRMAP completion, adoption and Year 1 actions, and that the 2023-24 budget has been framed, making provision for the corporate business plan priorities as stated. And I understand that next month, or sometime soon, Council will consider the draft corporate business plan and will ensure all projects and actions contained within it are funded through the 2023-24 budget, as proposed for their approval tonight. So, for some clarification, can you please clarify what is the budget allocation or provision made in tonight's budget specifically to fund CHIRMAP action, the CHIRMAP action priority mentioned, and where, under which schedule, which line item does this amount appear in the budget presented tonight?
Thank you, Ms. Hearn, for the question. In relation to that question, there is no separate budget allocation in the draft 2023-24 annual budget linked to the CHIRMAP due to the report currently being in a draft format. Specific actions and priorities linked to the findings in the report will have funding allocations detailed in future budgets. Any immediate work or initiatives associated with the CHIRMAP this financial year will be delivered through existing Shire resources. We expect this will include applying for relevant funding to undertake agreed actions.
Thank you. And how much was allocated in the 2022-23 budget for this matter, and what was it spent on?
In the financial years of 2021 and 2022 and 2022-2023, a total of $50,000 was allocated to fund the production and presentation of the CHIRMAP, including the resourcing of traffic management requirements supporting the geotechnical collection of data in Dalyellup and Peppermint Grove Beach.
And that's what it was expended on?
Yes.
Yep. And so the same question for 2021-22? What was allocated?
That's the same. Yeah, it's the same.
Oh, that is it?
Yep.
That's for both years?
Both years.
Added together?
I believe so. Yes.
Yep. Okay. So, after all of that, how much has the council therefore built up over the last 4 or 5 years to provide for the expenses of the map? And you've already said that it's not quarantined in a specific reserve, is that correct?
We do have a climate change adaptation and sustainability reserve.
Right.
So, yeah, the council understands that there will be a future financial commitment required for the Shire to mitigate the risks identified through the implementation of the CHAR map. The Shire operates the Climate Change Adaptation Sustainability Reserve, which currently projects an end-of-year balance of $53,493, with subject to the draft budget seeing $29,000 transferred into this reserve during this financial year. This reserve will receive future funding investment aligned to actions and priorities that will be linked to the final CHAR map once received and endorsed by the council.
So can I just ask for clarification, that covers other things besides the CHAR map, that amount built up? Or it's all for the CHAR map?
That reserve is linked to actions through the Climate Change Adaptation and Ability, so there is a committee that has oversight of those actions as well.
Okay. So, question 2, is it appropriate then that the corporate business plan explicitly assumes adoption of the CHAR map? As to my understanding, the council has yet to consider the CHAR map, so would receive, consider or respond to the CHAR map be more appropriate?
The Coastal Hazard Risk Management and Adaptation Planning Guidelines, which support State Planning Policy SPP 2.6, State Coastal Planning Policy, advise that the final CHAR map be presented to Council for endorsement. So the Council will be asked to consider and endorse the final CHAR map when it's presented rather than adopt, in line with the State Government Guidelines. There is no statutory requirement for a formal adoption of the CHAR map, and that the CHAR map will not become a legal document, unlike local planning strategies and schemes, for example. The Shire's corporate business plan, which is still in draft, will be amended to update this wording and reflect what's in the state planning policy.
Thank you. And so the council has yet to take a position on the CHAR map?
Yes.
Okay. So what progress or actions have been taken by the Shire or the Parent Peninsula Group in order to respond to, explore or clarify the many significant issues that have been raised since the CHAR map draft became public concerning report details and facts, research required and options suggested?
The Parent Naturalist Partnership is currently going through all submissions received with the consultant Water Technology in order to update the CHAR map so it can be finalised and presented to representative local governments. For your information, 58 public submissions were received on the Capel CHAR map, and 53 of those were from the community in the Shire of Capel, mostly from Peppermint Grove Beach.
And I understand some of those suggested further research, so there at this stage hasn't been no further research?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President. So we've only been advised, I guess, of the number of submissions that were received during the submission period. We have yet to receive the updated draft from the Parent Naturalist Partnership. They're still going through that process. We actually at this point don't know their proposed changes to the draft.
Thank you. And so in a previous meeting it was discussed whether or not the updated draft would be available to the public before it comes to council. Is there any plan for that?
I'm not too sure if there'll be any separate consultation, but as part of council reviewing and potentially endorsing the document, it will be available for public comment and submission to councillors as part of their consideration. Yep.
And I think you've already answered my last question about what actions or expenses are provided this year.
Yep.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cernan. Thank you for providing those questions on notice. Mr. Brian Hearn, Peppermint Grove Beach.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, look, I have a few questions on the rubbish, and firstly, thanks to all those that have responded to the questions. I do appreciate it, probably with the exception of Councillor Mogg, who apparently didn't receive the questions, and I have reported that to info@capel to find out why it went astray, and I'm still waiting for a response. I also sent a test email to Councillor Mogg, and they're aware of that as well. Anyway, my questions. I've just been staggered to learn that sanitation requirements, rubbish rates, are recommended to increase in 23-24 fiscal period for the 3-bin system by 70%, from $365 in 2023 to $621 in 23. Likewise, the 2-bin system in 23-24 fiscal period is recommended to increase by 70%, from $271 in 22-23 to $461 in 23-24. Effectively, when other increases are taken into consideration, a minimum rated property will receive an increase of 11.1% on their rate notices. That's inclusive of the 5 separate charges this fiscal, while a property with a GRV of, say, 17,000 will receive an increase of 15.57% in 23-24. With this in mind, I have a series of questions. The first one is, given the Shire was aware that the rubbish contract was due to expire on June 30, 2023, what date was the tender renewal document released, and why has it taken so long to negotiate a new contract, and why has no information been provided to the public about the proposed 70% increase or even the name of the successful tenderer?
Thank you, Mr Ham, for your questions. The Shire of Capel has been collaborating with 6 neighbouring local governments for the last 12 months to deliver a cost-effective regional approach to the delivery of a waste services contract. This regional approach realised the best cost and risk outcome compared to the Shire proceeding alone, of which we did have as part of our tender document. All 7 participating local governments accepted this approach as the waste services tender option. The completion of the contract with the successful tenderer Cleanway was signed on the 28th of June 2023, allowing for the continuity of services under the new agreement from the 1st of July 2023. In addition to increases in collection charges, there's also been other increases in other areas that have affected the budget, such as FOGO disposal, which is disposed of by the Bunbury Harbour Regional Council. Contaminated waste charges have increased from $120 a tonne to $240 this financial year, resulting in a $126,000 allocation needing to be put into the budget to dispose of contaminated FOGO.
Thank you. The second question, you may have answered with the first one, but just for the record, on face value, it would seem that the lack of timely action has left the Shire in a position where they will, where they will either accept the awful contract arrangements that appear to have been offered, or immediately cease collecting ratepayers' rubbish. Is that a correct assumption?
The South West Waste Services public tender, of which the Shire of Capel and 6 other local governments were party to, has been progressed as a priority for the last 12 months. The tender attracted 3 competitive tenders that required a detailed evaluation of all matters within that tender. The tender provided an opportunity for all local governments to tender collectively for the regional price preference, as well as an individual price to each local government for all required waste services. The regional price was the most cost-effective outcome across all local governments, with each adopting this option as the preferred tender price, from which was negotiated from the final individual, which was negotiated as the final individual contract. The Shire of Capel adopted this option at the special council meeting held on the 8th of May 2023, which provided the best outcomes in terms of cost and lowest service delivery risk compared to the cost if the Shire were to proceed alone.
Thank you. Third question, under the new contract, how much in dollars will be collected from ratepayers for waste disposal in 23-24, and how much was collected in 22-23 as a comparison?
The income to be collected from ratepayers in the 2023-24 financial year under the new contract is a matter to be decided by the Council tonight in item 15.3. In 2022-23, the income received from fees and charges in our waste sanitation area was $2,478,070.
Thanks. And question 4, from the amount collected in 23-24, which we don't know yet, how much will be transferred to reserves, how much has been allocated to capital expenditure, and how much will be provided to supply the weekly collection service to the ratepayers?
I might have to take some of that question on notice. There's a bit more detail involved in that than what was provided on notice. So we'll take that question on notice to make sure you get an appropriate answer.
Okay, thanks. What are the costs of capital upgrades planned for the Shire Depot? And I'm referring to a comment made on page 249 of 374. And why are these costs funded out of the rubbish reserve? I was under the impression that remediation works, contamination was undertaken at the site several years ago and that problem was fixed.
There are no capital upgrades planned for the Shire Depot in 2023-24. Should any capital upgrades be planned in the future, the council at the time will determine how this is funded. There are, however, continuing contamination issues at the Shire Depot.
Okay, thanks. At the Capel Community Rates and Budget meeting held on June 2023, mention was made of potential/substantial, can't remember the exact words, savings that would be made resulting from the tender that was called by a group of councils rather than the Shire going it alone. What has changed since June 2023 to bring about a 70% increase?
As answered previously, the regional price was the most cost and risk effective outcome for all local governments, with each adopting this option as the preferred tenderer from which to negotiate the final individual contract. The regional collaborative approach was the best option in terms of cost and risk, as opposed to going it alone.
Okay. And can ratepayers with a 3-bin service opt for a 2-bin service to reduce costs?
There's a recommendation tonight to review waste service activities included in the agenda tonight within the 2023-24 financial year, including the Shire's continued participation in the FOGO 3-bin system. Should residents' feedback opt to not participate in the FOGO program going forward, this 3rd bin could be withdrawn from their property on request.
That's encouraging. If continued contamination is a problem with either of the green or yellow bins, why not do away with the 3-bin service altogether and stick with the 2-bin service we had before the problem began? So I guess you've answered that, so don't need to say it again. But I understand there's just as big a problem with the yellow bin as there is with the green bin. But I could be wrong there. So, question 9. Due to the lack of information in the attachments, I'm not aware of how many dollars are currently in the rubbish reserve. Last check some time ago it was about 4 million. I now know it's 2 million. Surely some of these funds can be used to soften the 70% increase, say, over a 3-year period.
The Shire has been utilising the waste reserve to subsidise the actual cost of providing waste services for some time. This has seen the reserve balance decrease from $2.5 million in 2020-21 to $1.8 million in 2022-23. The reserve has also been used to fund detailed investigation of the Shire's many declared contaminated sites, most of which are the result of previous rubbish and landfill activities.
Okay, thank you. And question 10, when is it planned to actually advise ratepayers that rubbish rates are rising by 70%, or are we hoping no one notices until they get their rate bills?
A comprehensive waste information fact sheet has been completed and will be available for residents as soon as possible. This will occur prior to the rates notices being received by residents. The Shire has worked as fast as possible to the waste services tender outcome to ensure an uneventful continuation of the waste services, and to provide accurate, open and transparent information is provided to the community.
That's good to hear. When the attachments were put up, I drafted the other 8 questions, so I'll go through them very quickly if you like. With regard to the 70% increase in rubbish charges for 23-24, based on my understanding, and please accept I may have misread the figures of the Shire's finances, why is the Shire budgeting for a surplus of $135,628 in Schedule 10 rubbish and sanitation services when the rates are going up by 70%?
We'll have to take that on notice, Mr.
So the expenditure figure is 4.203 million and the revenue is 4.33 million. So that's actually a surplus of 135,000 based on what's in tonight's papers. But I'm happy to have that taken on notice. But if you are considering alternatives, there's $135,000 there.
Yep. We'll take that on notice and have that clarified for the proceedings tonight as well.
Question 2, it would appear that 147,630 has been allocated for remediation of contaminated sites, which you touched on earlier. Why not met these charges out of the rubbish reserve?
That's what the reserve's, part of the reserve's purpose. And depending on how you allocate funding in a budget, that could be where that money is coming from.
But it doesn't appear they're coming out of the rubbish reserve. Are you saying they are coming out of the rubbish reserve?
They are. Yeah. They are coming out of the reserve and we're still undertaking the investigation into those reserves.
They are coming out of the rubbish reserve?
I believe so, yes.
It didn't appear that way in Schedule 10?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Shire President. We're still at the phase of doing the detailed contaminator site investigation. So the cost of those is coming from the reserve. We're not at the point of having the investigations complete and then having to implement the actions. We're still at the detailed site investigation stage.
Right. So then if those funds are coming out of the reserve and it was shown where it was shown in Schedule 10, that means there's another $147,630, as well as the surplus that could be offset against the 70% increase. Question 3, can you provide a breakdown of the $123,055 allocated to general tip maintenance as overheads / OPS?
We'll take that on notice, Mr. Hurn.
Did you not receive those? Or
Pardon?
did you not receive those?
When were these questions sent, Mr. Hurn?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
No, Mr. Hearn, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, the Chief Executive Officer.
Through you, Mr. Hearn, we received your first 10 questions.
Yep.
But not the subsequent 8. And we checked. Did you send it through info at capel? Or?
Exactly the same as the first lot, yeah. No, I sent it to, I sent it to, I think.
It was on the form.
Yeah, it was on the form, you know, yeah, on the form,
So
yeah.
no, certainly we received the first 10 questions. We haven't received the subsequent 8.
Well, I'll just, the others are pretty quick, but I think they're important. The question 4 was, given that there are $274,600 in direct employee costs have been allocated in Schedule 10, that was basically 6 positions, what justification is there for allowing a further $788,924 as an administrative allocation? Although I agree there is a need for admin allocation to justify full cost recovery, the amount seems excessive. So I guess what I'm saying there is we've allocated 6 salary positions, $274,000 into the rubbish account, and there's a further admin charge of $788,000 allocated as well. My next question was, while I agree there's a need for an admin allocation charge, can you provide a breakdown of what makes up the $788,924? Incidentally, I did send these questions out to the councillors, so as well. Anyway, the reason I raise the $788 admin charge is because that's the equivalent of 4,000 chargeable hours at $200 an hour. And I just find it incredible that such an amount can be charged to rubbish, and I was seeking some justification as to what makes up this figure.
Sure. The administration allocation is put through a system and an algorithm which allocates funding based on debits and creditor requirements and corporate requirements by corporate staff and resources in the administration. It also has a weighting depending on total cost area of that service. So that goes through a process which is auditable, and then it comes up with a number which distributes that corporate resourcing requirement across all schedules of the organisation.
Well, using my algorithm, as I said, I've worked it out that it's the equivalent of 4,000 chargeable hours at $200 an hour. And to give that some perspective, that's the equivalent to a person on a salary of $390,000 per annum. So it's quite exceptional, especially when you consider the Shire of Dardanup appears to be charging $261 for rates this year, and the City of Busselton $272.80. It's way lot lower than ours. But anyway, we'll get an answer for that later. Question 7, without the benefit of details of the contract, let's assume a 5-year deal with CPI increments of approximately 4%, can I suggest that consideration be given to increasing rates this fiscal by, say, 20%, with annual increments for years 2 to 5 of 15%? If this is feasible, and with a good narrative, which apparently you're doing, for ratepayers to understand, it would soften the blow for ratepayers and lead to full cost recovery. I'm now aware that I'm wrong here because it's actually a 7-year plus 3-year option, so, you know, there's a lot of room to move to get a better result. And finally, while I accept the officer's comments relating to questionable decisions that's been made in the paper, made in the past, I think it's time that we all moved on from that regrettable saga and accept the position we're now in, that we're now faced with. So if you like, I'll pass those questions on if you haven't received them, but I don't know whether the council has got them, but I'd send them out to the councillors as well. So.
Right, thank you, Mr. Hearn. Sure. We'll review those and we'll have a look into where those questions went and we'll make sure an answer is provided to you. All right, and then we had one other question I noticed from Brian Hasty, who doesn't appear to be in the audience this evening. So his question was, my question pertains to the bulk rubbish collection in various towns and rural locations within the Shire of Capel. Specifically, I'd like to know the reason for the delay in picking up bulk rubbish during the advertising time period of 1 week, starting on the 17th of July and ending on the 21st of July. The areas affected included Dalyella, Peppermint Grove Beach and special rural regions of Stratham. So thank you, Mr. Hasty, for your question. With the total number of properties in both areas not being evenly split due to the geographical locations of the division along the volume of bulk rubbish placed out for collection, the contractor was unable to complete the collection of all items placed out on the verge within the time frame specified due to the quantity. The Shire was advised that the remaining items were to be collected the following business day and were so on the Monday, the 24th of July. All right. Are there any other public questions? Mr. Brian Hearn?
Sorry, Mr. President, just one without notice, and it was in regard to item 18.1 electoral boundaries, which I think has been withdrawn.
Yes.
But my question is, and would have been, is it possible for the CEO to ascertain if the ratepayers of Peppermint Grove Beach and those living on the west side of Bustle Highway, down as far as Roberts Road, are for or against the proposed boundary changes under the Electoral Act, as no other area in the Shire is affected. So, if the Shire is to make a submission, can it at least ascertain from the small number of ratepayers in Peppermint Grove Beach whether they're for or against the proposed changes?
So yes, the motion has been withdrawn from this evening's agenda. There was no plan as part of that motion to do any direct consultation with residents in an area. However, the Shire would advocate on behalf of residents through a decision made by elected representatives who represent people in that area. So no, there was no direct consultation planned. The suggestion going forward is that residents can make their own individual submission to the Electoral Commission as to what they think those boundaries should be. Sure, thank you. Thank you. Are there any further questions from the public? No? All right, we'll move along. Applications for leave of absence. We have one request on the table from Councillor Christine Tarantroy, leave of absence for the August Ordinary Council meeting. Is there a mover for that request? Moved Councillor Dillon. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. I'll put that leave of absence request to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion? Apologies, we just...
Councillor Tarantroy.
Councillor Tarantroy for. Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
And that is carried unanimous. Are there any further requests for leave of absence? All right. No more applications. Move along. Declarations of interest. I've received none this evening. There are no items to be discussed behind closed doors, so we move to the confirmation of the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting of the 28th of June 2023. Is there a mover for those minutes? Councillor Mogg. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor Mogg, any discussion on those minutes? Councillor Dillon. Is there any issues or comments on those minutes? No? I'll put those minutes to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the minutes?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the minutes?
For.
And those minutes are carried unanimous. All right. Announcements by the presiding member without discussion. I have 3 this evening. You may have noticed that the CEO and I look a little bit more casual than usual this evening. Well, that's for good reason. The Shire of Capel is proud to unveil a new part of its uniform complement. A little while back, the Shire of Capel asked the Dalyellup Primary School for assistance from 18 students who have Australian, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage to produce the designs that would be incorporated into our new polo t-shirts for the Shire and also to be used at the school. The designs are very unique and original, but what is very special about it is that the designs can symbolise a personal meaning for each student, such as cultural background, features of country, family, self and community. Once we had the designs, the Shire engaged Talia Bonnell, a Wadandi artist, to incorporate the designs into an image that relates to the Dalyellup Primary School's dolphin logo, the natural environment within the Shire of Capel. Talia has said that the line work behind the dolphins represent the songlines and connection to saltwater country. The other details are based on saltwater coral and a connection that the Wadandi had to country for over 60,000 years, including the coral, which is considered one of the oldest living skeletal organisms in the ocean. Talia contained it within this artwork as it represents the rich cultural history and heritage of the Wadandi Budja. The Shire looks forward to wearing these t-shirts with great pride and feel that design has great depth of meaning and significance. We also have a keep safe signed by all those who took part behind me this evening. A big thank you to all those who helped and were involved in this project and saw it along to completion. The Shire of Capel would also like to thank Mr Murray Scott following his stepping down as the Deputy Chief Bushfire Control Officer for the Shire of Capel. Murray has held this position for over 2 decades and was also part of the reason that he was awarded an honorary freemanship in 2021. Murray has decided he will continue to serve in the Bushfire Brigade, but instead of wearing a red hat, it'll be a white hat and he'll be holding a hose. Information will be forthcoming soon regarding the replacement for the volunteer Deputy Chief Bushfire position, with a proposal from BFAT coming to Council in the near future. And finally, just a congratulations to Rail Heritage WA through the South West Rail and Heritage Centre on taking out the Steam Locomotive Restoration Award for 2023. Restoration of the Leisure Lady has been a big passion for members of this centre for many years. She can be viewed in action on open days when weather and conditions permit. Congratulations once again to the Rail and Heritage Centre. All right, there are no petitions, deputations and presentations. There are also no motions of which previous notice has been given, and there are no questions of which previous notice has been given. We now move along to Chief Executive Officer reports. 13.1, the Corporate Business Plan 2022 to 2026, end of year reporting for the 30th of June 2023. Is there a mover for that officer's recommendation? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mogg. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr President. It's good progress onto the targets that have been set early in the piece, and I'm looking forward to the outcomes of the current financial year that we're sitting in.
Councillor Mogg.
Thank you, Mr President. I'd just like to back up what Councillor McCleary said. Thank you.
Are there any speakers for or against that recommendation? The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr President. I just note it must have been a very busy fourth quarter to go from 7% complete to 50% complete. So well done to the organisation on that.
Any other speakers? Councillor McCleary? No? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For. For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
And that is carried unanimously. 13.2, the Shire of Capel Economic Development Framework 2023 to 2027 amendment. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just had one question on the item, if that's okay. I noticed in a lot of the target thing there wasn't anything mentioned about the extractive industry or mining in economic development, or am I missing that in the process?
The Chief Executive Officer.
Excuse me, through you, Shire President. The economic development framework is meant to be just that, so a high-level framework that talks about higher-level strategies. The intention is then that actions in each year will then fall out of the framework and be included in the corporate business plan. So quite likely some of those things that you've mentioned would come into the corporate business plan as actions around the framework. But this is the high-level framework, so we're not getting down into specifics.
Thanks for that. Yeah, so I'm kind of happy with the economic development framework, looking for additions of that sort coming in. There seems to be a bit of a high emphasis on tourism in the framework, which possibly a good thing. It'll be interesting to see how we change over the years.
The Deputy President.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I mean, I'm very supportive of the economic development framework from the start and the original version that was adopted. I mean, it seems that this has been done pretty much in consultation with the local businesses, and I mean the addition of the business perspective, and I think in conjunction with the tourism, but also the activating places and localities. I mean, they're good additions as well. I think there's also, and I mean, there has been decisions before council which since that time that are now included in here as well, like the retail trading hours, which I think are an important part of our economic framework. So the addition of that and the position that council's taken on that, I think is important to include. And yeah, I think there is definitely a big focus on tourism and agribusiness in here. And I take it that maybe perhaps some of the feedback was that there is the general retail and business that perhaps we're looking for a little more focus in the framework. And I think that definitely the Shire, through its multiple actions throughout, has been addressing that community as in a beneficial way, but definitely through the retail trading hours and the locality and activating of spaces, I think it has a flow-on effect. So to add them in as addition, I think makes sense. Is a sound decision. So yeah, very happy to endorse the updated economic development framework.
Are there any speakers against the recommendation? Speakers for? No. Nothing online. Councillor McCleary, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I think it's good to have a framework like this. I hope it encourages conversation and coming back to council as we develop through, as we review it over coming years. I think it's always good if it opens up discussion within the community. So I endorse the framework.
All right, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
That's carried unanimous. All right. 13.3, the Chief Executive Officer Performance and Remuneration Review Policy. So we did have the foreshadowed motion, which was the original officer's recommendation, on the table. That has also been seconded by Councillor Tarantroy, which lays on the table with no councillors having spoken to it. So as the mover, I suppose I'll say, following deferral, and there was a discussion, a bit of a workshop on it a couple of weeks ago, an alternative policy has been presented towards us, so I'd like to consider that one this evening. So I'm hoping that councillors will first someone foreshadow that policy, and then hopefully we then vote this one down, and then we can consider the updated policy which takes into consideration feedback from the briefing. Councillor Terrantroy as the seconder, did you have anything to say on the foreshadowed motion?
No, I'm for it.
All right, I'll open up to the floor. Are there any speakers for or against the policy? Councillor Dillon?
Question, if I may, Mr. President, is this the point where we do make an official foreshadowing?
Yeah, so councillor who's not the mover or the seconder of the current motion can foreshadow.
I would like to foreshadow the new amendment if we could, please.
So councillor Dillon is foreshadowing the alternative policy to item 13.3. All right. Do you have anything further to say on the current policy that's on the table? No. Are there any further speakers to this item? No. As the mover, I'll reserve that right to speak. So I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Terrantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the policy?
Against?
Councillor Terrantroy, can you, Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the policy?
Against.
And that policy is lost. So we now move to the foreshadowed motion by Councillor Dillon. Moved by Councillor Dillon. Is there a seconder for that policy? Seconded by Councillor McCleary. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, look, what it comes down to is, as you rightly described when we were knocking the previous amendment on the foreshadowed motion on the head, there was some consternation in the room during the June OCM, and we basically deferred the motion so we could go away and workshop it, which we did as well. And I think there was just some concerns about little bits of wording and some of the minutiae, if you will, on that particular motion, which I think we thrashed out adequately in the workshop. And that's the new motion which is coming to council tonight. So I was at that workshop. Thanks to the staff for helping us through that. I think it's a better outcome, and I would urge all my fellow councillors to vote for it tonight.
Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Yeah, look, I think with all the working through of the mechanisms of getting this policy up, I think the one we've got now before us is a good policy. It'll carry us forward in the review of the CEO's performance.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for? No. Councillor Dillon, do you wish to close? No. I'll put that policy to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Terrantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For?
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
Against.
That's carried 6-1. All right, we now move to infrastructure and development reports. 14.1, the Southwest Design Review Panel Memorandum of Understanding. There's the officer's recommendation there. Is there a mover? Is there a mover? Councillor Mogg? Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon? Councillor Mogg?
Thank you, Mr. President. I read the motion as read. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon?
Not too much to say, Mr. President, but thank you anyway. So ultimately, this is about the Shire having the ability to go to the design review panel and basically get their assessment of various things that might come to fruition around the Shire, be it sort of architectural, landscaping design and sustainability issues as well. So I believe we pay a modest fee on a per review basis, and I think it would be not something that we might necessarily utilise all the time, but it would be a good thing to have in our arsenal, and I think we should support it as a council. Thank you.
All right. Are there any speakers for or against? Councillor Andrew, I noticed you've got your hand raised on the screen. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. Is there a reason? It's a question, if I can.
Yep.
Is there a reason why the cost isn't being passed on to the applicant?
Sorry. The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thanks, Mr. President. The reasoning is that the review panel has decided to have 3 meetings free of charge for each applicant to encourage those to actually seek review and utilise this service.
Sorry, I'm getting part of what Tanya was saying.
Sure. The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
So the design panel have decided that the first 3 meetings that occur with the design review panel, it takes about 3 meetings per application to get assessed through the panel. One is pre-application, then there's application, then there's post-application. Each of those applications will be free of charge for the first 3 of those meetings. So basically we sponsor the applications to go to the design review panel to allow and encourage more of the applicants to go down this pathway. Therefore we get a larger buy-in to the scheme.
Anything?
Sorry, I don't understand. My interpretation of the information is that because panel members get paid, that cost is then borne by the councils that then submit designs in for consultation. Is that?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Through
Yeah, the
Mr.
Director. Yep.
Through the Shire President. Either applicants, as in developers, or the Shires can utilise this service.
So can we make the developers go through the service? Because I'm assuming if they elected to use it, they would be picking up the cost. Is that correct?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
So at the moment, no, that is not recommended to be passed on to applicants. However, that is a consideration that council may wish to take.
So, sorry, so if the developer wants to submit their plans for review, who then pays that fee, even if the developer submits it? The council does?
Correct.
Anything further, Councillor Andrew?
Sorry, I didn't hear Tanya's response at all.
Oh, sorry, yes, that's correct, councillor.
So is there an avenue for us to pass the cost along to the applicant?
Yes, there is an avenue to do so. We haven't put that as part of this item, but we can explore that if that's council's wish.
Okay.
Anything further, Councillor Andrew?
No, that's a lot. Thank you.
Are there any further speakers? Question, Councillor McCleary?
It's probably a bit of understanding on it. So this is more for complicated planning processes that come towards us, and I did note further in there, there's probably internal costs that we would occur in reviewing planning anyway.
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
That's correct, Councillor McCleary. Regardless, the Shire staff will have to assess these applications anyhow, and it doesn't circumvent any of the normal council process at all. This is a pre-application for development approval process that would be considered to try and get the best outcome for each of those developments through a set of design guidelines, and will be assessed on a regional basis rather than independently. So it's used as an adjunct to what we already do, but it doesn't take place of what we already do.
So follow-on question, it allows us access to expertise that we don't have in-house.
Director?
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor McCleary?
Okay, with the answers to those questions, I think this is a good buy-in that we need to get involved with. It will give us some rounding off of our planning decisions. It'll fit in with the regional schemes that are coming out. I think it's a worthwhile exercise. And as pointed out in some of the questions that Councillor Andrews raised, it looks like there's the potential for us to get a recovery thing, and that might be warrant further discussion at a later date. But I think, we see things happen in our Shire that don't kind of fit in. We've had these discussions before, and I think it'd be great to get that extra level of expertise without having to pay someone an annual salary to achieve that. So I think this is a good outcome.
Are there any other speakers on this item? The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a couple of queries. The approximate cost per application is guessed at about $800 to $900. I take it that that's not per meeting per se, but that's for the entire process. Is that correct?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
That's correct. That's per application.
And so follow-up question, subsidising the first 3 meetings, and the Director has mentioned what those 3 stages are. Under what circumstances would a 4th meeting occur, or more, and is the intention, and the way I read this agenda and the responses so far, the intention would be to charge those further meetings to the applicant? Is that correct?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development.
There's no intention to have 4 meetings per application. The process is derived to ensure that you can get the outcomes within 3. So if you've done your pre-application properly with the group, you shouldn't need a 4th. So there's been no proposal for 4 meetings in this particular MOU.
I guess I'll just add, I was thinking in my head that there would be a number of meetings. I think I'm understanding now that what the Shire is really doing is subsidising those 3 meetings, and the goal is to achieve that within those 3 stages. I just say that I think I concur with Councillor McCleary on this as well. I think this is a great option when you consider the cost of such expertise from a staffing perspective. At a budget of just over $10,000 per annum, and we're talking about application fees costing $800 to $900. Obviously, this isn't something that's going to be used on a weekly basis. It's reserved for complex applications. But yeah, again, I concur with the sentiments from Councillor McCleary.
Are there any other speakers to this item? No. Councillor Mogg, do you wish to close? No. I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against? Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. 15.2, Local Planning Scheme Number 8, Scheme Amendment Initiation, Design Review Panel, Head of Powers. Yep. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't think there's necessarily much more to add, given that this item is a continuation of the previous item, and I think so is the subsequent item as well. So I think we've had quite a discussion around the design review panel, so I present the motion to Council.
Councillor Dillon. Are there any further speakers for or against this item? No. Does the mover wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. 14.3, Advertisement of Draft Local Planning Policy 6.8, Design Review Panel. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Much the same as the last item, except in this case dealing with the local planning policy. Thank you.
Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I concur with Councillor Sciano in that this is just tidying up the loose ends of the previous decisions.
Are there any speakers for or against the item? No. Does the mover wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
That's carried unanimous. All right. Community and Corporate Reports, 15.1, the financial reports for the 31st of May 2023. Is there a mover for those reports? Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. The Deputy President.
Sorry,
Did I?
14.4.
I did. Oh, apologies for that. I did skip ahead. Well, I've got already a mover now and a seconder for this 15.1. So we'll deal with 15.1 and then we'll go back to 14.4. So does the mover wish to speak to those financial statements?
No, thank you. I'm right.
The seconder? No. Is there any speakers for or against those financial statements? No. Does the mover wish to close? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
15.1. For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
Those statements are carried unanimously. We'll now return to item 14.4, Local Planning Policies Final Approval. I apologise for the confusion. Is there a mover for those local planning policies? Councillor Sciano. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. I mean, the council has seen these policies pretty well close to their final form before advertising. They're now back from advertising. There is a detailed note of some minor changes from DPLH and DWER throughout, but I don't think there's much more to add. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
I think our Deputy President summed it up beautifully, and I'm happy with that as presented.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for? Any speakers on those items? No. Does the member wish to close? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Terrantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
14.4, for.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
That's carried unanimous. All right, we now move to 15.2, the accounts paid during the month of June 2023. Is there a mover for those accounts? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor McCleary.
Just move the motion as read.
Councillor Dillon.
Nothing in particular other than to say it's the first time I've managed a couple of mentions in the one item. Thank you.
Are there any speakers for or against those accounts? Nothing on the screen. No. Councillor McCleary. I'll put those accounts to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Terrantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
And those accounts are carried unanimous. 15.3, adoption of the annual budget and differential rates for 2023-2024. There are 10 recommendations for us to consider this evening. The first 5 require an absolute majority. So we'll deal with Officer's Recommendation 1 first. Yeah, that's fine. All right, Tracy, is there a mover for Officer's Recommendation number 1? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Look, there's been a lot of months spent getting into these, setting these rates and things, and I think it's in the right place given the economic climate where we're at and the cost to the council. I do know that the GRV is for residential rates is lower than the one that was set by the City of Bunbury earlier in the week. So I think we're sitting in that par, but ignoring that because we're looking at what the costs are for this council and we're running a budget for this council, not any other council. So you need to take that into consideration when you make this decision, and I'm for this motion.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would definitely like to endorse our annual budget for 23-24 here tonight. In particular, I want to credit our tireless, hard-working staff. I know this is the culmination of everything for Sam and her team, and it looks very thorough, very professional, and I think things, despite some tough times over the last budget period, are pointing in the right direction, and I credit the team for the hard work they've done and commend our budget to my fellow councillors.
Are there any speakers against the recommendation? Speakers for? Councillor McCleary, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to concur with Councillor Dillon's comments about staff and the efforts that put in. There's also a great effort and time spent by the councillors around the table in reviewing these things and acknowledging this outcome.
All right, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Terrantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
And Officer's Recommendation 1 is carried unanimously. Officer's Recommendation 2, is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just moved the motion as read. I think it just follows on from the previous one.
Deputy President, is there any discussion on officers' recommendation 2? No. Councillor McCleary, anything to close? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
Sorry, this is officer's recommendation 2.
Yes.
Against.
That's carried 6-1. Pardon? Officer's recommendation 2, there's the original officer's recommendation. An alternative has been provided. Is there a mover for... officer's recommendation 3. Is there a mover for the original or the alternative officer's recommendation? Moved, Councillor Sciano.
I'm moving the alternative officer's recommendation 3.
Is there a seconder for that? Seconded, Councillor McCleary. The Deputy President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry for being a little hesitant to put my hand up. For those following along at home and for those following in the chamber, alternative officer's recommendation 3 is related to a late amendment attachment 15.3.4, which proposes a greatly amended waste refuge fee as opposed to what has been presented as the original staff officer recommendation. That is instead a 30% change. Now, I have struggled with this decision since it came onto our agenda. I think that the proposal of a staggered approach, noting, of course, that there is absolutely no commitment to any staggered approach through the motion, and that will be a discussion that Council needs to have retrospectively to this discussion in 12 months' time. But the fees and charges, and I hope that the Shire President perhaps contributes to this discussion here as well, given that he's done an immense amount of work in trying to find an alternative that Council can consider. It is, however, still a big ask. And I remember sitting in this room a couple of months ago talking about the challenges and the cost of waste. And it is a matter of fact that the cost of waste across Australia is increasing. And while the waste contract that we did finally determine for this financial year was well above what we have paid in previous years, but was the best deal available. That's the truth of the matter. There are some radical options. There are canning FOGO and side verge pickup and all these other things that I think require an immense amount of community input before decisions like that are made. I think that this is a better option, but I've made this very clear that when we are managing a levy like this, there has to be a plan. When we are collecting funds through a levy like this, there has to be a plan, and there is a new officer's recommendation further along the agenda for recommendation 10, and that recommendation I think is the absolute best outcome that we can get in conjunction with this this proposed amendment to the recommendation and proposed amendment to the fees and charges. We cannot continue to hold out our hand and squeeze the purse without a proper plan. And there are lots of plans. There is a contaminated site plan, there are programs of works, and there is obviously a waste tender that we have to pay the bill for. But waste is a challenge, it is a problem, and we have to have a waste management reserve spending plan, because we also have to have a vision for the future in what we want to do with waste as well. So I completely understand, and I do understand the staff's, the officers' recommendation and the background and the argument as to why there needs to be the cost recovery at the level there needs to be. But we as the stewards of the community have to find that ground that is achievable and set out that plan and that vision. The recommendation that's been proposed is a much better form in that, and the new officer's recommendation number 10 really addresses my primary concern of the waste management service reserve spending plan. I think these two have to work in conjunction. I very well think that if this recommendation is supported tonight, we need to follow that up with the 10th recommendation to ensure that we take this as a moment to set a course for where we want to go with waste, because we can't just ask for money to keep paying the bill. So look, I've moved the alternative officer's recommendation. I look forward to the discussion on the item, but yes, I commend the recommendation to the council.
Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councillor Shiano. Most of what you said is accurate. We can see by the comments that are coming in through social media and some of the emails we're getting that the initial recommendation is not where we really want it to be, but we've got some real costs coming in. And as mentioned, the new officer's recommendation 10 kind of sits neatly with this, and it gives us a plan of action going forward. One of the other things that we've got to be careful in, decisions that we make in a single year's budget impact future years, and that's why we're in the position that we are now, and we need to have that front and centre when we make these decisions during the financial impact. So I'm all for this alternative office recommendation and concur with Councillor Shiano's comments made earlier.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I first compliment Councillor Shiano on speaking so well to this alternative recommendation. I just want to make sure that everybody in ratepayer and resident land knows that we as a Shire, albeit that I might have been here just for half a term, we have been subsidising waste for years. Maybe in error. However, we have been, and even with this recommendation on the table, we will be continuing to subsidise people's waste. And I just want people to understand that it can't go on. I think this 30% fee increase is a fair compromise, and we need to look at what we're doing again in 12 months' time, unfortunately, because we're still going to be behind the 8 ball subsidising waste. We're not making anything on this. This is ultimately, it should be, in my humble opinion, about cost recovery. Waste is getting expensive, and it's only going to get more expensive. I agree with both my fellow councillors who've spoken to the item that item 10 is critical to go hand in hand with this. And I urge everybody in the Shire of Capel to consider what waste they're putting in what bins, because ultimately a careless attitude or a misstep could cost us, you know, in our hip pocket as a council, as a Shire, and we need to get better at it. I'll get off my soapbox now. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councillor Tarantroy.
Yes, so I agree with everything councillors have said. I just want to make sure that the residents understand that they heed this warning is that with this reduction and with the Shire continuing to use our funds that are in reserve to continue to subsidise this in a staged approach over 3 years, but there's no commitment to subsidise this or to complete the staged approach for the following 2 years. That was only to bring us to even. So by subsidising this, we're actually reducing our reserves to $800,000 in rubbish, in waste, in our waste reserves. So it's costing us just shy of $365,000 to subsidise the waste disposal that residents utilise. Now, as Councillor Dillon said, waste is an expensive business, and if we're going to look at, the environment and the cost of the environment, it's expensive, and we have to find better ways, like my fellow councillors have said, to deal with rubbish. However, we can't continue to take money from reserves to subsidise waste disposal for residents. In the end, it has to come back to paying for what you use. I am supporting this motion, but I just wanted to caution everyone and make the listeners aware that this is coming at a great financial cost to the Shire's reserve funds for waste. Thank you.
Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I concur with a lot of what has been said tonight. Yes, we have been subsidising the true cost of our waste fees since 2016, rightly or wrongly. But that's 7 years that we've been subsidising slowly more and more each year. It astounded me that we thought that we could climb all that back. 7 years of subsidisation in 1 year. So I am glad that Councillor Kitchen has come up with the alternative recommendation. I would have liked for it to have come from officers rather than a councillor have to do this kind of work themselves. And I also have a slightly different approach or attitude towards using the reserve funds. I would agree with Councillor Tranteroy about not using reserve funds if that reserve actually had a proper purpose or a proper strategy behind it. At the moment, we have just seemingly collected resident money with no plan on how to actually spend it. And I know that there's been discussion about we need a proper waste strategy and we've got contaminated sites that we need to deal with, but we don't actually have a plan for that. So until we do, that reserve, to my mind, is the residents' money, and it has every right to be going back to them by way of subsidy for their waste costs. I still don't like 30%. I don't particularly like the fact that this doesn't lock in a staggered approach, because that then means that possibly the rest of the way is going to be made up next year when we know that it's a reval year when it comes to GRVs, and I think everyone is expecting their GRVs to go up with what's happened with property prices in the last couple of years. And so that concerns me, that next year's budget is not only going to have quite a large rate increase, but there's also the possibility that residents are going to be slugged with the rest of the waste fee increase. But I will support this because it's much, much better than the original officer's recommendation that was contained in the agenda. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers to the item? Well, I'll say a few things. Look, thank you everyone for their comments this evening. It's certainly a sensitive topic. Every time we discuss asking the population for more of their money, it's always a difficult conversation. So I really do appreciate the sensitivity and the discussion that's been had around the table tonight. Look, there's a lot of comments I agree with, and you know, this is probably something we really needed to have begun work on last year, particularly when we had that large jump in the draining of the reserve to subsidise our waste services. It's been ticking along in the tens of thousands, but last year it just really whacked up to $500,000. So look, we can look at hindsight, but at the end of the day, this is the position we're in. We need to own it and move forward from here. So look, I think this position, even 30%, still doesn't sit right in some areas. But I think it does give us the wiggle room next year when we do have the GRV evaluation to still rely on the reserve if we need to do that as part of managing this situation. So even with moving with this alternative recommendation, we still will have about $827,000 come out of the reserve, but it still will leave us with a little bit over $1 million for the wiggle room potentially for Waste Solutions next year, as well as we move forward and realise our future commitments with decontamination of sites and any licence upgrades that we do know are coming along the way with our waste transfer station. As we know, it's pretty much nearly exceeded its licence. It's going to need some capital investment, such as a weighbridge, to move into that next category and keep operating. So, yeah, look, it's difficult. It's frustrating, you know, that there were some costs we knew that were coming along with the new waste services tender, but I suppose, and probably at the expense of a bit of regional collaboration, goodwill, what frustrates me is when organisations which aren't directly beholden to the voting population and the residents and the ratepayers, you know, the ones that actually set that disposal charge can wait till 2 weeks before you're setting your draft annual budget before they tell you we're going to increase our disposal charges 50% from $120 to $240 on contaminated waste. Unfortunately, we do run a bit of a high contamination rate, higher than we would like. But there are innovations coming forward with the new waste services tender contract, which hopefully we'll see some better education if we continue with the 3-bin service, but also there'll be cameras on the truck, so we'll know exactly where those contaminated loads are coming from, and we can have that discussion to try and bring that down, especially when we're having to quarantine $129,000 worth of funding to make sure we don't get caught out with contaminated loads. So I think there needs to be a better way forward with some of these waste management operators in discussing with local government, who is really their biggest and only customer, in how they get us better informed about what they're doing with their charges going forward, so that we can better plan and have a discussion with the community rather than putting out our draft budget and then realising, oh no, they're whacking it up 50%. So, look, yeah, as I said, I appreciate the sensitivity in this, and as mentioned by the Deputy President, it's not committing us really to anything next year, but this is the step forward I think we need to come forward, to go forward this year, and I look forward to considering recommendation 10 in undertaking a comprehensive review of our waste services with the community to see if they want to continue down this path, because I think this has certainly been more than the canary in the coal mine about what's to come with waste services in the southwest and across the state. So I'd just like to acknowledge those who did write in and contact us over the last few weeks regarding it. While of course nobody's happy with more of their money going towards things like this, there was a underlying tone from a lot of them that why is this always local government's responsible to sort out? Yes, disposal and collection of waste certainly is a core business service of local government, but it's continually falling across nearly 150 local governments to try and sort out what is a state and national issue, we need some direction, we need some support in what are we going to do with people's waste, because as it's been discussed, an option is, well, we just won't do FOGO anymore. But, you know, how's that then look for the morals of eco-friendly and waste disposal? So, you know, at the moment, really, it is just a decision between what's right morally and what's right financially. But until we undertake that consultation with the community, whether they're happy to ditch the FOGO or what other services, or just chuck it all in a hole, this is what we're proceeding with. So I commend the motion to the council. And going forward over the next financial year, we can have a really good review, a deep and thorough review of what we're going to do with waste, as well as having a chat with our neighbours who are in the same predicament as us with their waste services and what they're going to do about their contaminated load. So I commend the motion to the council. All right, are there any other speakers to the item? No, does the mover wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just briefly thank councillors for their contributions to the discussion, and I will just, for the meeting, make one comment. I in no way think that we are subsidising waste. Consolidated revenue and the rates levy comes from the same purse at the end of the day. Now, this is a financial model that is set up historically, and it does have benefits, particularly when you have a waste management or a reserve plan where you're identifying why you're collecting the funds and allocating them through a vision. But yeah, we don't. Does it leave a hole in our budget? It sure does. Will it deplete our reserves if we continue on this trend? It sure will. But it is in no way that I believe that we actually subsidise that. It's in the core business of local government. How we attract those funds is not quite relevant in that equation. But again, I thank councillors for their comments on this. I thank Councillor Kitchen for the work and working with staff and working with the organisation to put together an alternative recommendation. And I commend that recommendation to the council.
All right, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Sorry, I didn't see all. Put those in favour. Councillor Tarrant, you can please state whether you're for or against.
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
And those who are against the motion? That is carried 6-1. Officer's recommendation number 4. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor McCleary.
I'll move the motion as read.
Councillor Dillon. Are there any speakers for or against officer's recommendation number 4? No. Councillor McCleary. Anything further?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this motion reflects how last year went with the special area rate, and there's a bit of a review in the process that we're going to do over the coming year. So it should cover the cost as required.
Sorry, I already called for that. All right, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion? Councillor Andrew? Sorry.
For.
And that is carried 6-1. Officer's recommendation number 5. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary. Seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a motion about someone that lives across 2 council boundaries, and it's an ongoing thing that we have, and it's appropriate that we go down this path as the motion is read.
The Deputy President? No. Is there any discussion on Officer's recommendation number 5? No. Councillor McCleary, anything further? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. We now move to officers' recommendation number 6. There's also an alternative provided that because of the deferral of the ordinary council meeting. Those dates in the original don't align, so there is an alternative there. Is there a mover for the alternative officers' recommendation? Councillor Dillon. Is there a seconder? Councillor McCleary. Councillor Dillon.
Nothing much to contribute to this particular item, Mr. President, other than to give our residents and ratepayers some options in terms of sorting out their rates with the Shire, including a payment option as well. So just pretty much as presented. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councillor Dillon. Yes, look, I think this is a good move. And as we move this motion of the way we can alternative payment options, it's also good to consider that if someone's got some hardship options, talk to the council. If you're struggling with the payments, bring it back to council, and there's people to help.
Are there any other speakers to this item? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. Is there statutory requirements that everyone's rates are paid by a certain date?
The Director of Infrastructure and Development. Oh, sorry, the Director of Community and Corporate.
Thank you for your question through the chair. The date, the statutory date, or the date has to be set by council to allow the council to recover the cost or the outstanding monies in a timely manner.
Thank you. Can I make an amendment, please?
Your amendment, Councillor?
Pardon?
Your amendment, Councillor, yes?
Oh, sorry. So instalment 3, I'd like to push it out to the 15th of February, which would then push out instalment 4 to the 15th of April.
So, just for clarification, just instalments 3 and 4 in option 2 of the payments, delaying them by 1 month.
Yes.
Okay. We'll just get something on the board and then I'll read it to you
Okay.
to ensure you're happy. All right, so your amendment, Councillor, would read in point 1, option 2, amend instalments 3 and 4 as follows. Instalment 3, 15th of February. Instalment 4, 15th of April.
Perfect.
All right, is there a seconder to that amendment? Seconded, Councillor Dillon. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the dates and it's literally an amendment on the fly. I just think the 15th of January, it's a really awkward month is January. It's just after Christmas. It's just before the kids go back to school. And I think with the current climate of the financial pressures of households, I just think pushing that payment out to February just gives families a little bit more breathing room in their finances, covering Christmas expenses and expenses in relation to getting their kids back to school. And so, yeah.
Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I must admit, when I was reading the agenda, I was of a bit of a like mind. I suppose if I could include a question in my response, Mr. President, to the director, is this amendment going to cause any undue financial stress on the organisation?
The Director of Community and Corporate.
Thank you for your question through the chair. I suppose with anything, we're trying to ensure that revenue is collected in a timely manner to sort of meet creditor payments. It's the cash flow implication. But obviously, if there's appetite in council to support families, given obviously the financial impost at that time of year, it's understandable and one that officers will be able to work with.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, look, I am happy to second this this amendment. If the organisation can cope with the change of cash flow, I think it's got merit. Thank you.
Are there any speakers for or against the amendment? Councillor Tarantroy.
Yes, I'd like to thank Councillor Andrew for that amendment because I was thinking a very similar thing. Thank you very much.
Are there any other speakers to the item? Amendment, sorry. The Deputy President.
I may just be selfish because I don't have kids to get ready for school and I don't expect to have any to need to get ready for school in January going back in February. I am concerned about the cash flow implication. I mean, our budget varies from month to month on service delivery. January is probably one of the least hit months, and I think we all know that there is the least amount of purchases and procurement during that period because of the holiday. But yeah, I ultimately am concerned somewhat about the impact on cash flow, and I mean, I may be selfish, but I don't also see the huge implication in regards to the January component as well. But yeah, no, I'm just throwing that out there.
Are there any other speakers to the item? Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks, Councillor Shiano. Look, cash flow again. It's hard to predict how many people go into instalment payments and what the impacts might be there. It was a pretty hard question, I think, to answer. What's the cash flow going to look like? And then I'm looking at it 15th of April. Is that Easter? No. We're kind of moving it around holidays and things like that. Again, I'd emphasise that if there's hardship facing, there's other avenues to go down. I'm kind of okay with this because I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on cash flow, but it is starting to get to the end of the financial year when I know in an asset type thing we'd be spending up pretty big in that January, February, March, April. That would be a big impact period. But again, then it depends on how we've set up contracts and payments on contracts and things like that, whether they're a month behind that. So it's probably going to work pretty well. So I think I'm leaning towards it's okay to go with this option. I was thinking maybe it should have been 20th or 30th of January and 30th of March rather than those things, but the date, yeah.
Are there any other speakers to the amendment? I suppose I'll just say a few words. Look, I think I'm in favour of it. I'm just looking at our financial statements. In graph 7, majority of any outstanding rate balances are recovered by the organisation by December anyway. There's only probably about a bit under a third that's still outstanding by that period, which are the last probably payments that are in those last two payment periods, so I don't really see too much of an impact on cash flow. There'll probably just be a little bit of an impact on interest earnings through any of our accounts. So, look, I think this is probably a good amendment. Just, yeah, I don't think it'll be too big an impact, and you know what, we can review it in a year's time. So, oh, excuse me. All right, are there any other speakers to that item? No. Councillor Andrew, do you wish to close?
No, I just thank everyone for their support.
All right, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. Officer's recommendation number 7. Is there a mover for that recommendation? Councillor McCleary? Oh, apologies, sorry. No, that was just an amendment. That becomes... Getting ahead of myself. Right, that becomes part of the substantive motion. Is there any more discussion on Officer's recommendation number 6, the alternative? The Deputy President?
Just, Mr. President, that you made a very good point that may have changed my mind in regards to the amendment, and that my computer's gone dead, so I'm following on the TV now.
Right. Do you need power?
Yeah, probably.
All right. I'll just adjourn the meeting for 1 minute, just while that's... So I'll make it 5 minutes. All right, I'll adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes, just while we sort out some technological issues. All right, it being 7:47, I'll reconvene the meeting. The Deputy President had the call.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was concluded.
All right, are there any further speakers to Alternative Officers Recommendation number 6, substantive with the amendment from Councillor Andrew? No. Councillor Dillon, do you wish to close? No. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Terrantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. Officers' recommendation number 7. Is there a mover? Councillor McCleary. A seconder. Councillor Dillon. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is pretty straightforward as a financial management, and it gives like an error adjustment, and it's done every year. So I think it's just straightforward as the motion's moved.
Councillor Dillon. Are there any speakers to this item? No. Anything further, Councillor McCleary? I'll put that item to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Terrantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
And that is carried unanimous. Officers' recommendation number 8. Is there a mover for that? Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Councillor Dillon. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is not one of those items. It's just tidying up the end of the budget setting. So yeah, I move the motion as read.
Councillor Dillon. Are there any speakers for or against? Anything further, Councillor McCleary? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Terrantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. Officers' recommendation number 9. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Dillon. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Basically, this is just a document or a statement as to why we are doing what we're doing in terms of a rating strategy, and I commend it as read to Council.
The Deputy President. Nothing? Are there any speakers for or against this recommendation? No. Councillor Dillon. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Terrantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. There's new additional officers' recommendation number 10. Is there a mover for that? Councillor McCleary. A seconder? Councillor Sciano. Councillor McCleary.
I think we had a lot of talking on this. This is the recommendation that has a review process for the waste service going forward, and it'll help us make decisions in the future budgets in the following years. I commend the background to getting to this and the help that was put through by all involved. Yeah, I'd just like to put the motion as read.
The Deputy President.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. As Councillor McCleary said, I think the discussion around why this is necessary has been had throughout these budget discussions tonight. But ultimately, this is the motion that sets the foundation for us to develop the vision. And this council has been working on a vision when it comes to waste and waste management, because the Adaptation, Climate Change and Sustainability Committee has always had waste as a focus. And I think ultimately this process has perhaps been sped up, or we've been forced to play a hand here and get on top of this sooner rather than later. I think purely over the financial implications of managing waste and the increase to that that everyone is experiencing. But this is the vision statement. This is the vision statement. So I'm very happy with this recommendation and commend it to councillors.
Are there any other speakers to this item? Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. I'm just wondering why you haven't provided a date for the CEO to come back with a report. Was there a reason?
Well, it's to be included within the 2023-24 financial year. There's obviously quite a few steps to undertake regarding consultation with the community regarding service level requirements and what the needs and wants of the community are, especially around frequency and delivery methods and all that. So I suppose it's about reviewing it within the financial year to ensure we can make an informed decision in preparation for the 2024-25 annual budget.
So playing at devil's advocate, because it's silent on a date and we've put the financial year, there's actually nothing stopping the CEO from not coming back with this report until June next year, in which case the information isn't going to be able to be incorporated into the budget. I think if we wanted in time to actually consider it for the 24-25 budget, I think we do need to put a date on it that we need it back by.
I'll take that as a comment, but I probably would strongly disagree with the first instance. I don't think that's the way this organisation operates. But I suppose it's up to a councillor to move an amendment as to whether they think there should be a date included.
Okay, can I move that amendment, please?
Yep. So amendment, Councillor Andrew.
So I'm happy to somewhat defer to the Director of Corporate as to when we would need that information by for it to be able to be incorporated into next year's budget.
I'll probably just take advice from both directors there, considering it'll cross the both departments.
Okay.
Yep, the Director of Community and Corporate.
Hello, thank you for your question. Through the Chair, just taking into consideration the budgetary planning, the timelining that we've done, anticipating what's going to be coming to Council already, starting to build the budget for the next financial year, I would estimate, and obviously taking into consideration the mid-year budget review, where it'll give us 6 months' worth of performance data with the waste service charges to see how we're going with that. I would say project around April. And that'd allow us sufficient time then to absorb whatever we need to into the budget, but the financial sustainability modelling then goes into rating.
Sure. So it might be best to put report back by April. So if information does become available sooner, though, it can be reported to the council before that. Yep. All right. So are you happy with that, Councillor Andrew? April?
Yep. Yep. If the director's happy with that date, then yes, I'm happy with that date.
Sure. All right. We'll get a amendment up on the board, and then I'll read it to you.
Okay.
Report back before just April 2024 to inform decision making. So put it between. I think just make it a point 3. Because if it's on point 1, it won't work for point 2. I think make it that point. Do you understand? Yeah. I don't think it's okay. If I'm working with that, I think it was better. Yep. I think we're all there. Just So the amendment, Council, would read to include point 3, the date of the report relating to point 1 and 2 be brought to Council by April 2024, Ordinary Council meeting.
Perfect.
All right, just get that. All right, is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Tarantroy, are you seconding that amendment?
Yes.
Seconded by Councillor Tarantroy. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you. This isn't to suggest that the CEO would do something like not bring it back until too late for it to be incorporated into the budget. I just don't like ambiguity, and I like things to be as clear as they can be. And it was the one thing that stood out to me with this recommendation, that there wasn't a specific date on it. So that's my sole reasoning. I like dates.
Councillor Tarantroy.
Yeah, I concur with Councillor Andrew. I think a date for reporting back to Council gives the Shire staff a target to be able to meet and give us the information they have by the April 2024 OCM. And I think, you know, as more information becomes available, they'll provide that. But I think a date actually makes this point 10 more real and easier to target and focus on if you've got a date, like timelines and stuff. And I think that it gives also council and councillors more time to have the information rather than get it at the last minute. And I know that the staff work really, really hard, but this is an area where we really want the residents' input on this. And if we have this target, then we'll have the input from residents prior to this so that it can be compiled and included. And I think this is a good way forward. Thank you.
Are there any speakers for or against the amendment? Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I trust the CEO and the staff to come back with good information, but I do have a question in relation to this. When did we get the increase in the disposal fees for the current year? My understanding is we got it June before we could set the rates.
The disposal fees for FOGO from the Bunbury Harbour Regional Council were received in June, following their meeting in June. Collection charges were part of the waste services tender, which Council was aware of a little bit prior. Disposal charges, though, from Clean Waste site at Stanley Road, I'm not sure when we received those charges. I'll defer to the Director of Infrastructure and Development.
They've come through as part of the contract for cost of processing. It's all incorporated within that.
Are they reviewed annually? And would they come at the same time frame each year?
Yes, Councillor, they are reviewed annually, and we will have to, we've already spoken as a group about that increase in fee, likely to be around 4.5% per year as part of the contract. So we will incorporate whatever those increases are on an annual basis for budget deliberations as best that we know at the time.
Probably just a little bit further on that, Councillor. The Shire of Capel, we've written to the Bunbury Harbour Regional Council in particular about the last 2 financial years, about receiving those fees and charges updates as late as June, which is very difficult for a local government to operate in. So we have written to them about it, we've made them aware, and we have not received a response.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the officers. Look, I think this amendment's unnecessary. I was quite happy with the way we were heading with the original recommendation. So yeah, I'll be voting against the amendment.
Are there any other speakers to the amendment? No. I suppose I'll say, oh, look, I don't mind the addition of the date. I think it's a target to work towards, and if there's certain parts of the report that can't be filled in or met, then that can be clearly explained, and we seek that information later on, particularly if something like fees and charges are delayed until June. So I think we set a bit of a goal. Yeah, and if there's information we require later down the track, simply because that information's not available yet, then that's what we'll do. Are there any other speakers to the amendment? No. Councillor Andrew, do you wish to close?
No, I think it's all pretty self-explanatory. Thank you.
I'll put that amendment to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against?
For.
And that amendment is carried 5-2. That becomes part of the substantive motion. Are there any further speakers on the amended officer's recommendation number 10? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I suppose the point I wanted to reiterate with this new recommendation number 10 is if the Shire is going to be doing a comprehensive review of our waste services, I would expect that to include some community consultation. And I think that's where people need to start thinking about the true cost of their waste services or the waste services we provide. I think they need to think about utilising them as well as possible. I think people need to consider whether we could dispense with certain services, whether it's hard waste collection. I, for one, will miss Rat Week if it was ever to be done away with. Do we do away with green waste curbside? Are people happy with the services that we're currently providing, and are they happy to pay for them? And if we do some community consultation workshops, and I'm pretty sure we probably will, I hope we get some people there to give us their thoughts. Thank you.
Are there any further speakers to recommendation 10? No. Councillor McCleary, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mr. President. Look, this final recommendation tidies up things. Some of the things going forward, and we're getting that from the contract, is that there'll be some ways of identifying contamination in the waste. So there's already an action within the current contract to identify those issues and possibly the offenders going forward and errant ratepayers in how we might manage that and get a better refinement of stuff going to landfill. There's also the other elephant in the room is we've got some known costs coming into the waste receival station long term, which will chew up reserves. So we've got to be very aware of that as we get to the end of this current financial year and looking at the next one and all the legislation that's going to face us. Look, I'm happy. Well, the amendment is the amendment, and this is now the main motion for it. I think we've got a good way forward. I'm looking forward to the report. I'm sure it'll be well in on time, and I think it'll be interesting to see how we get the cost for the next financial year.
All right, I'll put that recommendation to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Tarantroy, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
Councillor Andrew, can you please state whether you're for or against the motion?
For.
And that's carried unanimous. All right, is there any new business of an urgent nature? Nope. We'll now move to public question time. Are there any questions? Mr. Brian Hearn.
Mr. President, will be the last one. after the annual electors meeting, I understand council adopted the recommendations, and one included a recommendation relating to Airbnb. On the airwaves, there have been several more instances in Peppermint Grove Beach with Airbnb, and there's been some unsavoury comments made, which I won't repeat. But my question is, between now and the time council comes up with a policy, can it put out some sort of information piece to ratepayers on what they should do when there is a problem in an Airbnb? That's going to save a lot of misinformation going around.
Sure.
And people bucketing the council, or bucketing the Shire, sorry. So that's the question. I didn't write that out, Talia, so I'm sorry.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll take that. I suppose the biggest thing is once something becomes antisocial, the right thing to do is call the police. But we can certainly have a look at that and all right. We'll have a look at that and we'll provide some feedback. Thank you, Mr. Hearn. Are there any further questions? No? All right. Motions without notice. Are there any motions without notice? No. There are no... are there any notices for consideration at the next ordinary meeting of the council? No. There are no items for consideration behind closed doors, and there being no further business on the agenda tonight, I'll declare the meeting closed at 8:10 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance. And just in closing, I'd just like to thank all those who have been in attendance tonight or provided feedback on the Shire's annual budget for the 2023-24 financial year. It is one of the largest and most important decisions that a local government can make, and we do appreciate people taking the time to put in their feedback, think about it, and let us know what their thoughts are. So, thank you, and thank you to the staff for all the work they've done in preparing that. As was mentioned a little bit by the Director of Community and Corporate, preparations for budget 2023-24 have already begun. It already exists as a document, so always happening. Thank you very much.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Councillor. Good night.